Hello, we are talking about relationships and their relationship to immunity. I'm Tom Salt, a medical doctor and functional medicine practitioner.
With a registered nurse.
And everything's backwards because we're in selfie mode. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about relationships and how to cultivate healthy relationships, but also the relationship between relationships and your immune system. So it turns out that good relationships are incredibly healthy for you. Hi, Yolanda.
Hi, Yolanda.
And unhealthy relationships, it turns out, are quite detrimental. First of all, a big study in the Netherlands, I believe it was, someplace in the Scandinavian places, they looked at records from their national healthcare system, and they asked, the research question was basically, what's the most important thing to get you from your 60s into your high 80s, 90s, and 100? And they looked at, smoking. You'd think that'd be super important, and it is, but was it at the top of the list?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't even like
Midway.
Close. Yeah. Stopping drinking midway, taking your blood pressure medicine, controlling your blood pressure, taking medication in general, all paled in comparison to the top two things. The second most important thing on this list of what gets you from your 60s deep into your 70s, 80s, and 90s and 100s was those few close personal relationships, the people that you can rely on in a crisis. And what was the number one?
And number one was social integration.
So what does that mean?
Social integration is those meetings that we have in our daily lives when we're out and about. So those interactions that we have with others, most of the time they're probably someone you know on more of an acquaintance level or somebody you don't know at all. So when you're meeting somebody, you walk into the grocery store and you hold the door open for them and make eye contact and say hello. That is an example of social integration, and the eye contact is a very important part of the whole aspect of it.
It is. There's something about that eye-to-eye contact that actually sets off a cascade of chemicals in your brain, neurotransmitters and neuromessenger molecules that release other hormones that calm your nervous system, calm your autonomic nervous system, and just generally give you a sense of connection and a sense of peace and belonging. So that's a really, really important piece of the puzzle. There was another study done where they looked at married couples, and they gave the married couples a test to determine their sense of angst and anxiety about the connection with their partner, not about just general angst and anxiety. And it turns out that the people with the most angst and anxiety had a statistically significant elevation of cortisol in their system. And in fact, that level of cortisol was as big or bigger than other risk factors, such as being obese or having anxiety disorder or any other thing like that. And it represented about 11 to 22% increase over baseline of cortisol. And that is enough to cause immunosuppression. So just having anxiety about your relationship causes significant immunosuppression. And we know that close relationships are important and odd things. The very people in our lives that we probably should treat with the most respect and the most kindness are often the people that we're the most rude to and the most short with. So cultivating a friend of my, I'll say an acquaintance of mine, has a saying that she says to her husband, and it is, if this were a date, I'd be going home. And that's her not so subtle way of saying, you're being a jerk. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, because so often we take our spouses maybe a little more for granted than we should, maybe a lot more for granted than we should. And returning to the reasons we're together and the importance of that relationship, and actually treating it like it's the most important relationship in our lives, I think really can be powerful and important for our immune system. Lindsay, hi.
Hi.
So, what do you think about relationships?
I think that they are, as I can see in my life, and I'm sure many of you can in yours, they are a core piece of our overall feeling of wellness. So if you're in a relationship, or maybe there's just a specific person that you know it's not a healthy relationship that you're interacting with, there are consequences to that relationship, and they can sometimes, if we don't deal with it in a healthy way, we can experience symptoms that come out in our body as suppressed emotions, or maybe things that we aren't dealing with in a healthy manner.
Mm-hmm. I'm holding my head up because I'm trying to read little tiny print. Who else checked on there? Catherine, hi. Yeah, so the immune system definitely has effects, and so what do we do to cultivate healthy relationships?
Healthy relationships and healthy emotions, because emotions can be just as toxic as lead.
Yeah, maybe more so.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is, you always get it right, I always get it wrong. It's Brene Brown's comment about conversations.
Oh, that we have many conversations throughout a day,
Yeah.
and a few of them involve other people.
Yeah, I love that. We have many conversations throughout the day, and a few of them involve other people. So maybe the first relationship we should talk about, and really the foundation for all other relationships, is the relationship with ourself. So I love Brene Brown, and she's got a wonderful book called Braving the Wilderness, and I highly recommend it. And hello, Andrea. It's a wonderful book, and the beauty of it is she does really talk about, the first relationship is the one with yourself, and she says there's sort of a difference between fitting in and belonging. And she says, accepted for who you are is belonging. Accepted for being like everyone else is fitting in. Mm-hmm. So really, fitting in is not our goal. Belonging is our goal. And if you go someplace and you're not accepted for who you are, it's not your place.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we have interactions with others, and maybe we're meeting somebody new or going out with a new couple, and you go into the conversations thinking, oh, I hope they like me, when really you should be thinking, I hope that I like them. Yeah. Because you should be, presenting yourself as authentic as you can. You shouldn't be trying to tailor your conversations around what you think they want to hear or what you think they want to talk about.
Yeah, that's really, really important. Don't worry about whether or not they like you. Hope that you like them. Mm-hmm. And by hoping that you like them, it changes the entire dynamic of the thing, because instead of trying to fit in, you're trying to belong. Mm-hmm. Because you're just going to show up as yourself. You're not going to show up as the version of yourself that you think they're interested in, because you can't even guess that anyway.
Right. Real belonging only happens when you show up as yourself. That's the only way you can belong. That's the only way you can have that sense of, I belong here.
Yeah, so that really means that you have to be trying to read the...
Daniel.
Hi. It means you have to be brave enough. You have to be brave enough to be yourself. And that requires being vulnerable. There is no bravery without being vulnerable. I mean, think about it. You think about the ultimate act of bravery is maybe running across a battlefield to grab your buddy and drag him to safety. Well, what's more vulnerable than running out from behind the cover, right? That's true, obvious vulnerability. But emotional vulnerability is required. And you have to be brave enough to have that emotional vulnerability to have a healthy relationship. If you're not emotionally vulnerable, you're actually just codependent. And codependency is not good for anybody involved. So well, I'll let you talk for a minute. I keep talking.
I think I was going to go into codependency a little bit more because I think it's a term we all hear a lot, and really, what does it mean? I'm sure on varying degrees we all have codependency issues, whether it's minute or whether it's large, depending on the relationship. But really, codependency is, to me, I feel it's when you take on the responsibility of another's emotions. So you kind of neglect yourself in order to, feel love from them, feel acceptance from them. So you're giving it everything that you have to make them happy. Yeah.
Make them happy at your own expense. Delay your own needs and put yourself last. I love, speaking of putting yourself last, I love a pastor I had in the past, and he said that as a Christian, you're always third. There's God, there's everyone else, and then there's you. Well, he didn't mean it in a codependent way. He meant it in a service way, a true altruistic service way. And I think that's true. But altruism is different from codependency, because in altruism, you're doing it from a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. You're doing it out of curiosity and compassion, whereas in codependency, you're doing it out of fear. You're doing it out of loneliness.
Or fear of how they'll respond to you.
Right. So it's possible to be of service without being codependent. People, especially codependent people, are worried that they're just selfish if they do anything for themselves. And, the truth is you're no good to anybody if you're not taking care of yourself.
Right. I think it all has to do with looking at really what is the motivation behind your actions.
Yeah.
And, the motivation should be love. And it should also be self-love. So you love yourself enough to set those boundaries, to, demand that you
be treated respectfully.
A certain way, and to hold somebody up to those boundaries.
Yeah, so I like to say that most people, many people think that fair falls like right at their toes. Maybe there's 10 feet between us. So here's the distance between us. And, fair would be sort of in the middle, right? But a lot of people think that fair is like right there, right? If this is me, fair must be right there. I have to, well, other way around, this is me. I have to go all the way to this person. That's not fair. So a way of thinking about fairness is to put yourself in their shoes in the most compassionate way you can, and then ask this question: would I be asking for this help? And if the answer is yes, go for it, 1,000%, right? But if the answer is no, then maybe something other than doing for them is the best strategy. Maybe teaching them, the fable of fishing, right? Hand a man a fish, you feed him for a meal. Teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And so you have to be careful. Are you just handing out fish, or are you helping people learn to fish? And I think that can really help people sort through codependency if they're willing to be honest with themselves. And that, again, the first place, be vulnerable and honest with yourself. So, what else? You got some skills there.
Yeah, the skills were more going back to Brene Brown and braving the wilderness. So she has a set of skills to better our relationships, not only in the relationships with others, but also the relationship with ourselves. And the first skill is know how to listen. So know how to, a lot of times I think we're in conversations with others, and again, we're worried about, what should I say? What should I say next? And that shuts us off from listening. And really, we just need to be open to listening to another without thinking about what we're going to say next. And maybe when it comes to the end of the conversation, instead of adding your piece, maybe just reflect back part of what they just said to you.
This is called the Iron Man or the Steel Man argument. When you're having a conversation, somebody says something to you, the goal of really excellent communication would be for me to reflect back what you said in a way that you agree with. So you say, the sky is blue. And I say, so what I'm hearing you say is that the sky is blue. And they say, yeah, that's correct. Now, if you say the sky is blue and I say, well, I understand you're saying that there's some mystical quality about the sky. Well, no, that's not at all what you said, right? So by reflecting back a version of what they said that they can actually agree with, doesn't mean you agree with them. It just means you are acknowledging in detail that you understood them. And now it's your turn to maybe refute or agree or add to or whatever you want to do with that. But saying, they say the sky's blue and you say, well, the dirt's brown. Okay, well, so what? It's a non sequitur and it doesn't add to the conversation. Yeah. But so many times we're talking past each other and we're not talking to each other. So yeah, that listening skill, it's really important. And the other beautiful thing is you're out and you're feeling nervous and you just have to ask one simple question and they say something. So what do you do for a living? I'm asking you.
What do I do for a living?
Yeah, what do you do for a living?
Well, that has changed over my lifetime. So, right now I could be like, well, I'm a business owner and then...
What's your business about?
My business is called Simply Beautiful. And it's about health and wellness for women.
Really? That's interesting. What kind of things do you do?
I'm not used to talking this much. I do different types of therapies and coaching.
Coaching, like what kind of coaching?
Like life coaching or wellness coaching.
Well, that's really interesting. What would a person, like what kinds of topics would somebody come to you for?
They could come to me for anything from just personal growth, or maybe it has to do with their business coaching or relationship or health.
So you're sort of a third person who just goes over things and helps them see the big picture? Is that the idea?
I listen to them, yep, and I ask them specific questions, and they have the answers, so it's just...
they have the answers, see? So that's the interesting thing. So we just had a conversation. I didn't contribute anything. I just continued to ask questions. So you're at a party, you're feeling really uncomfortable, you're feeling really vulnerable. Ask questions. If they ask you a question, you can answer it, but just keep asking questions. It keeps the conversation going. And at the end of the conversation, they will tell somebody what a great conversationalist you were, and you didn't say a damn thing. You just asked them about them. Because the truth is most people love to talk about themselves.
Except if you're an introvert, then you really don't. So this conversation for me was kind of uncomfortable.
She's going to walk away saying, that guy was a jerk. He kept asking me questions.
Right?
Yeah. So, okay, what else you got on your list?
And then next it's about, another skill is having those difficult, painful conversations. So if you're feeling heard about something, or maybe you're not feeling heard, or maybe you're not feeling seen. You know, maybe your partner is busy and you don't feel like you're having a connection with them.
Having deja vu right now.
So you need to have those hard conversations, because day after day, or you know, you think that you push them off, or you find a way to cope with them, but they're still there. It's something that you haven't processed and something you haven't brought to their attention. So, you know, 6 weeks down the road, when you finally get upset about it enough that you're actually having an emotionally driven conversation, there's a lot of damage that's done that could have been prevented. And think of all the stress that you've been carrying that could have been dealt with in the beginning. So it's having those difficult, painful conversations.
Absolutely. Super important. What else?
Another skill is being led by joy and curiosity, not fear. And I always think of the question by Einstein, is this universe friendly? And I hope that the answer to all of us is yes. Yes, it is. It's not a place to be feared. It's a place for curiosity and excitement.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, I like to talk about there's two kinds of type A personalities. Type A1 are driven by fear. They're afraid of failure, so they're overachievers, right? But there's another kind of type A, and that is the person who is so excited and so interested in the question that they can't put it down. Mm-hmm. And those people don't get sick. The other type A's, the ones that are driven by fear, they're the ones that get sick. Mm-hmm. So it's very fascinating. It's not as simple as it appears on the surface, but this idea of being driven by curiosity and not fear, it's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. And just so you know, if you're a type A1, you can easily switch to an A2.
Easily, maybe not, but you can definitely do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simply.
It takes.
Simply. I should say the word simple.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
It's
not easy.
Just not easy. Yeah, that's a good point. It's simple.
Yeah.
It's just not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But it is simple, and it really just takes getting your head around this idea of fear versus curiosity, and you know, letting go of this idea of you have to be perfect. You know, not everybody's life is actually as it appears on Facebook.
Yeah, most of the time it's the opposite.
And the other day when I turned the camera around to show everybody Grizzly on the floor and showed our disaster, my half, which is a disaster area, and it wasn't the Facebook appropriate picture, but you know what? It's the way I live, so too bad.
It is.
Yeah, it is. You know, much to her chagrin, but anyway. All right, what else?
Another skill is practicing to not only trust others, but trust yourself. And I really think you can't trust others unless you trust yourself. And if you think about it, like, of course I trust myself, but really, do we trust ourselves? Do we make promises to ourselves every day and then break them? Do we set that promise of like, oh, I'm going to, you know, work out today, and then you break it? And really the only way to build trust to the world is to build self-trust. And I think that starts with just choosing one promise every day, and it can switch, but something small, a promise, and you keep it to yourself. And it's a promise of some sort of self-care. So like, I'm going to journal today. Even if it's a sentence, you could say, I'm going to journal one sentence.
I'm going to meditate for 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just it starts with making a promise to yourself and keeping it, and then growing into trusting others.
So think about it this way. Think about how you trust a friend. And imagine if you were the friend and you were also, so now you're now schizophrenic. We've split you in two, and you're the person who's saying they're going to do something with this friend. Are you a reliable friend to yourself? Right? And if you aren't a reliable friend to yourself, that means you're not trustworthy to yourself. So you gotta dig into that. You gotta get trustworthy to yourself. And Jennifer, every single day, there you go. All right, so I think that's really important. Go ahead.
Another skill that she talks about is the courage to show up, be yourself,
Be vulnerable.
be authentic, and be vulnerable, because you can't be yourself and be authentic and show those sides of you that we don't show on Facebook. But until you really show those hard, difficult things, I think those are the areas, that's the level of connection. Yeah. When we share our struggles and another person comes and says, yes, I get what you're saying, instantly we have that connection with them and we really feel like we belong.
Yeah. So where are we in time land? Just, I don't want to keep you guys for the rest of your lives.
Okay.
Time blazing by here. So I want to go over one more piece from Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness. And it's an acronym, BRAVING. And braving has to do with how you trust people. So let's pull that little bit out and talk about the first, braving, BRAVING. And the first letter stands for boundaries. So set and maintain boundaries and respect the boundaries of others. That makes sense, but it's awfully easy to say, it's awfully hard to do, right? But children need boundaries, and relationships need boundaries. And if you don't set and maintain boundaries, people will gladly trample on you. I like to say, you command the respect you demand. That's just another way of saying you set and maintain boundaries. You command the respect you demand. And if you demand none, you have none, right? And so you become a doormat. So you command the respect you demand. And that really means set, and not only set, but also respect boundaries. And what's R?
Reliability.
Yeah, reliability. What about reliability?
Reliability is doing those things that you say you're going to do, or do those responsibilities that you are supposed to do. So, like if you're a reliable parent, you're probably going to make sure that your child has, clean clothes and food in the fridge, and you're going to make them meals.
In a safe environment.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different areas of reliability.
So accountability is the next, that's the A in braving, accountability. And accountability means you own your shit. It means that if you make a mistake, you own up to it. You don't bury it, you don't hide it, you don't run away from it, you don't blame others. You own it. Because that's how trust is built. Being accountable.
V, vault. So the V in braving stands for vault, which means that someone can expect that if they tell you something that they don't want the whole world to know, you won't tell the whole world. So that the things they say to you are safe.
Yep. It has to do with keeping, your story yours. If you tell me a story, it's not mine to tell, it's yours to tell. So, and I actually say that to people. When people breach my trust, I literally say to them, that wasn't your story to tell. And I think that makes it very clear. That wasn't your story to tell. So then the next thing after this vault idea is integrity. And that kind of goes back to the same idea of vault in a way, but integrity means choosing courage over comfort. It means actually standing for something. We're all tend to be, I got to lean the right direction here. This is to the right. We are all more Republican with our Republican friends. We're all maybe a little more Democratic with our Democratic friends. But we need to simply be able to tell our own truth with compassion and with caring and what's the word I'm looking for? Civility, but we need to nonetheless tell our own story and be where we actually are. Now, that doesn't mean that we're inflexible and immobile. It doesn't mean that a well-reasoned argument can't change our mind. That's part of being vulnerable, is being willing to be changed. In fact, I would argue that there's no point in entering a conversation if you are not willing to hear and possibly be changed. Yusuf, good to see you. Yolanda, being in a safe space, absolutely.
Being in a safe space, yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important part, this idea of integrity and being, I guess Don Miguel Ruiz says, be impeccable with your word. It's the same kind of idea. Be impeccable with your word, or have integrity and be who you are, and be willing to speak to bullshit, as Brene Brown puts it. Being willing to stand up, not in a bullying way, in a caring way, in a compassionate way, but standing firm where you believe the truth is. And yet, at that same time, and this is what makes it complicated, being vulnerable enough to hear the argument and possibly change your mind in the face of it. So what's the N
stand for? The N stands for non-judgmental. I think that if we look at our thoughts during the day, we judge everything. At least I'm going off of my thoughts.
Everything and everyone.
Yeah, everything and everyone. And I've come to realize,
especially you, Yusuf,
some of the things in my life that I have been so judgmental about were really whispering something deep inside of me that I needed to look at and forgive myself. So our judgments can give us such great insight into those things that we really need to reflect on. And why am I so harshly judging this person, or judging this situation, or judging myself even? I think if you ask yourself, the answer might surprise you.
Yeah, and you know what? Often it has to do a lot more with yourself than it does that other person.
It does.
So,
it really does.
Yeah, and then the G of braving stands for generosity. And generosity doesn't mean giving stuff. It really means taking the words that are served to you in their most generous sense. So the way I like to say it is, if we're having a disagreement, I want you to understand that the foundation of this conversation is, I love you, right? If that's the foundation, then it would be an inappropriate interpretation for you to think I mean ill for you, right? So that's what generosity means. Or another way of saying it is, don't ascribe motives to someone else that are more sinister than your own, right? So being generous in your interpretation of the words. And then going back to Don Miguel Ruiz and the 4 agreements for a moment, don't assume. So if somebody says something that you are offended by, be generous with your interpretation, but if you need to clarify, then be vulnerable and brave enough to ask the question. Don't assume. So when they say, when they say, I don't particularly like that shirt because it says Minnesota nice backwards, instead of Minnesota nice, then I go off in my own head and I say, well, they don't like my shirt. Well, then they must not like my clothes. And oh my God, they probably don't like my hair. And oh, they probably don't like me at all. But instead, stop and say, well, oh, you don't like my shirt. What is it about my shirt you don't like? Well, I don't like sarcastic, slogans on clothing. Oh, well, that's a whole different thing, and it's not me going all crazy in my head, right? Yolanda, I love this conversation, and Elizabeth, you are on fire tonight. I can feel your passion. There you go.
I'm all about the feelings and the emotions and being vulnerable.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So that's braving.
Thank you.
And that's braving. And I think it is such a powerful thing. So most of what we talked about today was Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown, but also another great book is The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So those two books, I think, can really turn a relationship around. Of course, if it's another great book is The 5 Love Languages. Kind of gives you a sense.
Chapman.
Yeah. It gives you say the author again. I covered you up.
Gary Chapman.
Gary Chapman. Because, you know, if my love language is, say, acts of kindness, and her love language is quality time, and I'm doing all kinds of junk for her, right? I'm vacuuming, or I'm doing this or that or the other thing. That doesn't feel like love to her, right? So feel like love means I got to sit next to her. And just sit there. Friggin' sit there, you know? And there's a beautiful phrase in the book, or a stanza or passage or whatever you call it in the book, where this guy is, you know, kind of getting that his wife's love language is acts of service. And he says, but I hate vacuuming. And the counselor says, well, nobody asked you if you liked vacuuming. We asked you if you wanted your wife to feel an expression of love from you. And so that puts it in a whole new light, right? I hate vacuuming, but I need to vacuum because that's what my wife thinks, you know, is love, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. But that's another really powerful book, I think, for people to kind of get a sense around. Just because love to me feels like, you know, one thing, it doesn't mean that my friend or my business partner or my spouse thinks the same thing. And it's a way of helping all of us get our head around how different people send and receive messages.
And another really great one that I just read again last week is The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
And that's just a really good book about how we need to find the compassion to love ourselves so we can love the world around us. Because if we can't love ourselves, we cannot fully and adequately love all those around us. And
I think it's sitting right there, actually. Either that or that's The 4 Agreements. It's one of Don Miguel Ruiz's books anyway.
Actually, I think that's Lincoln's book.
Oh, is it? It looks just like the cover.
It does, yeah. I mean, it's stacks of books.
So it's probably some Bernstein Bears or
yes.
something.
Yeah, I think it's... Yeah,
well, that's the same. Bernstein Bears, Don Miguel, it's sort of the same.
Yeah, I see it though. It's the...
Anyway,
yeah.
So yeah, what do we have?
The 4 Agreements. Selena says The 4 Agreements. Yes, that's a great one too. What is the second book title you recommended? It was
that was The 4 Agreements.
Yeah.
So the first one was Braving the...
Selena was answering.
Selena was answering. So The 4 Agreements... No, sorry. Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And then Love... What's the love one?
Mastery of Love.
Mastery of Love, also by Don Miguel Ruiz.
And you said one more.
I did?
Oh
yeah. The 5 Love Languages by...
Gary Chapman.
Gary Chapman. Yeah, that was the other one. The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
Yeah. Thank you. And Selena. It's a good one. I love this series.
Yeah. All right. So, I think that's relationships, and they're, you know, if you Google it, I mean, there is a ton about this. This is not like fringy stuff. This is serious research.
She's a researcher, yes, Brene Brown.
Brene Brown absolutely is, but I was just talking about relationships and immune system in general.
Yes.
Relationships and immune system, there's a ton of research. I actually have a book entitled something really catchy like The Psychological Implications of Gene Expression, or something really exciting like that. But it's about this thick, and it's just research studies on how our psychological state influences gene expression. Yeah. And of course, the interesting thing about this, you know, everybody wants to have their genes sequenced. That to me is a waste of time, to be honest with you. Yes, I said that out loud, Yusuf. It is what I think. He's still on. Yeah, he's long gone. That moron! Anyway, it's phenotype. There's genotype, which is sort of, you know, the blueprint, but then there's phenotype, and that's what's actually been built. And the genes we express or repress are constantly in flux. And it's dependent on what our environment and our diet and our lifestyle look like at that moment. And so the whole point of functional medicine is creating diet and lifestyles that help you express genes to create the very best version of you. And that's really what this whole, whoops, what did I just do? Yeah, I threw them away by accident.
Christina's watching.
Hi, Christina. Hi. Just in time for us to say goodnight. Anyway, anything else? Any other questions or any other comments that you might have? Since you are on fire.
Yeah. No, I can't think of anything right. But whenever you ask me that, that's always my answer. It seems like no. If you ask me a question, it's like everything.
As soon as I push that little button, she'll say, "Oh, I should have said this."
Yep. Then they all come flooding back to me.
All right. So really important. This week has been, I think, a really important week. We started on Monday. What's that?
No, you finish up.
I was just going to say well, go ahead.
You started on Monday with...
Well, I can't remember. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, we started on Monday with talking about sleep.
Sleep and relaxation.
Yeah.
And how important it is to the immune response. And then movement and exercise on Tuesday. And then nutrition on Wednesday. And then stress management yesterday and relationships today. Those are the 5 modifiable lifestyle factors that are at the base of the functional medicine matrix sheet that we use in functional medicine. And really foundational. I mean, that's where you start. You get those 5 things right, almost everything else starts to fall into place. Almost every single person I know with chronic disease, it started with something, some specific trigger. They had some antecedents, which means they had some predisposition. Then there was a trigger. It could have been a car accident, could have been an illness, could have been a traumatic relationship, could have been any number of things. But then it gets perpetuated. And we need to find all those perpetuating factors and stop them. But the first place that we start is with all of these modifiable lifestyle factors, and then we start digging into the biochemistry and the mental, emotional, and spiritual parts, and search for those antecedents, triggers, and mediators, and so on. So this is really the foundation. This week, this is the foundation, and I'm going to tell you that, hi Fran, I'm going to tell you that in Christina, or we already say hello to Christina. Okay, well, I'm short memory. If you really dig into those modifiable lifestyle factors, often you don't have to go to the doctor and do all the expensive stuff. It really is that powerful. I mean, just think about it. If you think about it, how many of you sleep as well and as long as you should? How many of you do a stress management routine every day? How many of you, eat as well as you should? So,
how many of you have perfect relationships in your life?
Yeah, well, All right, so Yolanda says, all of the videos have been amazing this week. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both for bringing joy to my day. Oh, well, thank you.
For joining us,
because the deal is, stressing doesn't really fix anything. And I like the saying that, well, we can either cry about what's going on or we can laugh. And it turns out laughing's better for your immune system.
Yeah, so we thought it would be a great week to really... zone in on these
things that we can actually do.
Yeah, the things that we can do.
Yeah.
And a lot of this week you're probably having maybe lost sleep over it and need help with stress management, and you're home all day with your family, so you need to work on relationship issues
and just so you know, I just looked down and I'm glad this is shot only from the waist up because my zipper's down. So. Oh, well, what are you going to do? Okay, so we will see you Monday with a whole new series of who knows what we're going to talk about. If there's something you'd like to hear about, let us know, because we'd love to talk about what you guys want to hear. All right? We will see you next week. Bye.